No Jack McMullen today on the Just Baseball Show, but we have to start with a little 5-minute intro about something completely different from baseball. I'm Peter Apple. That's Aram Layton. And then in the back half of this episode, most of this episode, we're going to be talking about the top 10 rotations with our honorable mentions, which you can find the article on justbaseball.com to follow along, or just listen to us and we'll go over the entire thing. The first thing that I want to start with you, Aram, is you gave me somewhat of a concerning take. And that take is that you eat to survive, and that if it tastes sweeter, so be it. You were kind of unaware of what soft cheese was, soft cheese being mozzarella, brie, ricotta, cheeses like that. And no, go ahead.
Isn't all cheese soft if you melt it?
Yes, but like a cheddar, a Swiss, they come in hard. You know what I'm saying? When you put it on, and then you have to melt them. The other cheese have a melty like consistency. Okay. But what I'm really worried about, you're one of my best friends in the world. And as a person who loves cooking, loves chefing up, loves food in general, I was nervous because I've been with you when we go to a Chipotle and your order is steak and rice on a burrito. And I say, and you have a juice today, which I love.
I do have a green juice today.
I'm wondering where that comes from, where the lack of not really giving a shit about food, you don't like to cook. Where does that stem from? Because I want to,
dude. I'm gonna bring it up maybe to a psychologist at some point, because I think it started like in college, or excuse me, in high school and middle school. I didn't like the school lunches, and I would just punt them. Like I would just fully punt them. And then I started to get used to just not eating. And then now I rip 3 to 4 coffees a day, which just murders my appetite. So now I feel like I'm like, oh, I didn't eat today. I need to eat so I don't pass out. So I eat for survival. And honestly, like living in New York, I can't cook. I can boil water. That's about all I can do. I can't cook for shit. Living in New York, I'm like, okay, well, if I eat one meal today, I can save some money. And then, I think about it. If I punt on one meal per day for a few weeks, think about how many Bowman boxes I can buy. Think about all that. Like if I punt on like 3 or 4 meals a month, that's that's a Bowman Chrome Auto for Spencer Jones. And so it's just what are your priorities? Your priorities are to cook and make a nice meal. My priorities are to starve and get a framed picture, or a picture of a baseball player that is autographed that hopefully appreciates.
Counteroffer.
Eating is not a necessity for me.
Counteroffer. You said appreciates when talking about a card value. What happens in a couple of years when all this health stuff comes back to bite you?
I mean, dude, I've already had 3 surgeries. It probably isn't a coincidence. I've had a shoulder surgery, I've had a hip surgery, I've had an ankle surgery. I think my body's just I've taken iron pills for anemia. I'm going to be the first guy to drop on this podcast. That's 100% true. Unless it grows enough to where I could, and we would probably need about 500x growth, that I could hire a chef. That's my dream. I will eat well if I could afford a chef. But right now I can afford a breakfast sandwich at the bodega, and then I can maybe boil some pasta for myself. And that's about it. But yeah, I'm going to unpack this. I'll come back a couple episodes later and figure out why I am the way I am. But I will say I didn't realize how weird it was until I got closer to people around me, like you spending time with me. Now my girlfriend, Ellie, who is wonderful and always wants the best for me, thinks I'm nuts. And of course Jack does as well. And so I'm working on it. I'm going to try and be a healthier guy in 2023.
I like that. We're getting better every day. So yes. I think now it's time to talk some baseball. We had a good little chat there.
Basically an intervention for my eating and health habits, which good thing you're coming to Florida so we can just go to Culver's and I can eat, real healthy food, like we should be.
And I'm glad that you and I are on this and Jack is not, because Jack would come in and say, you guys have never had Culver's. Culver's is so good. I understand what you're saying. We are going to eat Culver's when we're down there in Florida. Full video review. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials.
Yes.
We'll be posting it there. I can almost guarantee it's still not going to beat In-N-Out, but we're going to go in with an open mind. Yes. Just like you in 2023 are going to go in with an open mind about food in general.
Yes.
And this list, you have to have an open mind because it's really tough. It's really tough to rank the top 10 rotations. You can go off last year, but rotations are always changing. Guys have great years, guys have down years. It's really hard to correctly rank the top 10 rotations, but we tried our best on this one. When you were looking at the list, I guess my only question is like, how accurate do you think it is?
I think it's pretty solid, man. Like it's one of those things where for me, I understand, especially on the pitching side, right? Because when we're ranking positions, we're focusing on one player. I know when we ranked infields and outfields, it was a little different. But even outfields, it's 3 players. The rotation's tough because it's 5 guys. And not only do we have to figure out how we feel about each of the 5 guys, we have to then figure out how that compares to another group of 5 guys and how we feel about them going into next year as well. And so you're balancing a volatile position too, right? It feels like with a lot of the position players, you feel more consistent and safer with your conviction. I think with a lot of these guys, though, there was a lot of questions with other guys too. But I think with pitching, it's just so up and down. So I think there's, depending on the day, and there's some that, you'll tell by the way we go through this. And I think we're in agreement on the range, give or take 1 or 2 on each team. But I think depending on the day and how you catch me, I might tell you a different iteration of this top 10, give or take like one team switching up and down, here and there. And we'll talk about those. But that to say, like, it is also fluid. Some of these are so close that there's not one where I'm like, this team has to be number 6. Like you could make a strong case for 5. You did in our conversations. And I'm like, yeah, I hear that. Like that could make sense to me. And I know within 2 weeks of the season, we're going to text each other and be like, oh shit, we should have had this rotation higher or whatever. Like that's the beautiful thing about it.
And I think a perfect argument to explain why the list is challenging is starting with our honorable mentions and one team that got left off. This was a big argument today in the Just Baseball chat between everyone at Just Baseball, and I got outvoted. And I respect the voting process. We are a democracy here at Just Baseball, and I can have a take. If it is not appreciated by the rest, I got outvoted. So the Miami Marlins are our first honorable mention, and the team left out is the Cleveland Guardians. I look at a Guardians team and I think they have a higher floor, whether it's Shane Bieber at the top, Tristan McKenzie, and Cal Quantrill, very solid 3. And then you have the 2020 merchant, Zach Plesac, and Aaron Savali, who is either a 5 ERA or a 3.5 ERA. You never really can know. They obviously have a ton of depth in the minor leagues, as do the Marlins. And when I look at the Marlins, I see a ton of upside. Will Trevor Rogers bounce back? Maybe, but he was bad last year. How do you gauge that? Jesus Luzardo, super talented, but has dealt with injuries. Edward Cabrera, crazy talented, MLB The Show legend, but has only thrown 71 innings in his major league career. And then you have a guy like Johnny Cueto, who's great last year, but every metric under the sun is going to tell you that he's due to blow up. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think this is a perfect argument because what do you bet on? Are you betting on the higher floor? Or are you betting on the higher ceiling? Because I think it's clear the Guardians have the higher floor, but the Marlins have the higher ceiling. And the Marlins did perform better by a lot of stats than this Guardians rotation.
Yeah.
So you have the Marlins as this honorable mention. Tell us why.
Yeah, obviously subtracting Pablo was a blow. And I think that we're counting on, and you brought this up in the conversation, and I think this wouldn't surprise me given that it's the Miami Marlins. This would be the worst case scenario, but it's feasible. It's that Edward and Luzardo are hurt, which they both hit the IL last year, and Trevor Rogers doesn't bounce back. Like you'd hope that all 3 of those things don't happen, but like it's feasible. What honestly made me feel better about the rotation though was that even if that happens, like, yeah, it's not going to be a top 10 rotation, but I don't think it would be a total disaster, right? You can plug in a Braxton Garrett who, I know you've mentioned you like as a back end of the rotation arm. I like him as a back end of the rotation arm. He showed really well in his like 10 or 11 starts last year. That's a guy that you plug into the 4 and 5 spot and you feel fine about that. Even if Trevor Rogers doesn't totally bounce back, that's still like a fine 4 or 5. Like if he can make any step forward off of what he did last year. And I think he will. And he's looked good this spring. Cueto, like, yeah, it looks weird analytically, but he was even pretty good the year before that. So you're looking at like the last 300 plus innings where, again, if he's just a 5 starter, you've got the Cy Young winner, even if you eliminate Pablo and Edward, you've got, Cueto, you've got Rogers, hopefully you can bounce back a little bit. And then you've got somebody like Yuri Perez who, might make the team outright, which is crazy. But Craig Mish reported that in the Miami Herald. I think, that's a guy that even if he's not totally figuring it out yet, that's a good number 4 or 5, even as he still feels things out with a 97-mile-an-hour fastball and 3 pitches that he's comfortable with secondary wise. So even though they're more volatile than the Guardians, I think they have just enough backup plans and depth to feel okay about, the wide range of outcomes.
And it is totally reasonable too, because I am betting on a Trevor Rogers bounce back. It's funny when these debates come up, when I'm on one side, I almost have to take the opposite of the Marlins side, where I'm like, well, Trevor Rogers might not bounce back. I think it's swept under the rug that in his first 28 innings, and I think it was 2020, he had like a 6 ERA, but then looked incredible in 2021 and then reverted right back to it in 2022. It's just a really hard player to project, but you've said it yourself, looks great in spring training. The reason I hang my hat on the Guardians is I almost think Shane Bieber is becoming one of the more underrated aces in our league. Yes, the drop in velo was the discussion around Shane Bieber, and it was something to monitor, but it didn't seem to affect him. 200 innings again for Shane Bieber, 2.8-ish ERA, and then McKenzie, 191 innings, 2.96. We expect him to be better. So we could get 400 innings from these two guys at around a high 2s, low 3s ERA from the both of them. That's incredible at the top of your rotation. And that's not even mentioning Quantrill, who over the past 3 seasons has been straight up excellent. There's no other way to debate it. Yeah. And then Plesac and Savali, that's where it really drops off. And we were talking about prospects that could come up. The Marlins have more depth. That is, I think, unquestioned. When you look at Yuri Perez as a prospect who's one of the best in baseball and could end up contributing this year, and Braxton Garrett, the Guardians have guys like Logan Allen, Xavier Curry, Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams. Some guys are just more far off than those Marlins guys, and some haven't performed to the level of Yuri and Braxton Garrett. So, but I just hang my hat on the Marlins don't have a trio that I think can come close to the floor of the Guardians, but the Marlins kind of win out on everything else. But I still just want to hang my hat on. I think McKenzie gets even better. I think Bieber continues to shove, and I think Quantrill's great. And I don't think the Marlins have that.
I will give you that. Like the 1-2 combination. Like I think the surefire number 2 in Tristan McKenzie, I think really, really helps. You're hoping that one of Edward or Luzardo can make that leap.
And they have the stuff to do so. Like Edward and Luzardo are nasty.
They both have the stuff. It's just like, can they do what Tristan did last year is the question. I think both of them have a similar skill set and can do something similar to that, but they haven't done it yet. So, I hear you on that one. I think the 1-2 punch is definitely a separator for the Guardians, but then the Marlins hedge that by having Sandy Alcantara, who throws enough innings for like 1.5 people. So it's a really fun conversation, a really interesting one. And I think Quantrill, your boy Quantrill, will be a big X factor in this, because if he can repeat what he did last year, then I think the Guardians feel a lot better about their 1-2-3 up there. I feel good about McKenzie. For Bieber, it's about health, but we can't speculate on that. And like you said, his velo was down and he still found ways to get out. So, and as well as he ever has. So I think it really is about Quantrill, and then how bad are Plesac and Savali going to be? Because we've seen Savali give flashes of a fine back end of the rotation guy. We've seen Plesac have that 2020 season that you mentioned. I almost feel more concerned about Plesac. I think his stuff kind of stinks. Yeah. I think Savali can hold it down in the back of the rotation and be fine.
It'll be interesting, but let's move on to our second honorable mention. And this one I thought should have been top 10, but I understand, because if we're talking about volatility of the Marlins rotation, the Texas Rangers rotation is as volatile as humanly possible.
Yes.
On the top end, you have Jacob deGrom. If he's healthy for the entire season, he is legit. You have Andrew Heaney and Nate Eovaldi, who they recently signed. Andrew Heaney was excellent for the Dodgers, but in 90-ish innings. Nate Eovaldi had his worst season today and the velo drop-off, but could he regain it in Texas? I don't think we'd be shocked if that happens. Martin Perez was amazing last year, but he's never shown this in his entire career. Are we going to get 2021 Martin Perez? Are we going to get 2022? We can guess based on advanced numbers, but we aren't sure. That's one of the toughest guys to know. John Gray, again, what are we going to get? I expect John Gray, that's kind of the one arm who I do think is going to be better in 2023 than he was, kind of adjusting off Coors. Now he's finally settled in. I think he's going to have a really good year. This rotation, if healthy and they reach their potential, could be top 5.
Yes.
But if a lot of the problems arise, they're not the top 15. So that's why they make our honorable mentions, because we're almost going right in the middle of both scenarios, which I think is fair. I might have had them 10 because maybe I just believe in it a little bit more, but believing in it doesn't always mean much, right? We have to see what happens.
Yeah. So I would say if you asked me this 3 to 4 weeks ago, I probably have them in the top 10. And then you start spring training. Jacob deGrom's already had a flare up. Nate Eovaldi's already had a flare up. And we're like, shit, man, this thing's not going to work. I think it still could very well work, but it's a little bit unsettling when exactly what we were afraid of is starting to happen from the jump. It was like literally it felt like the day pitchers and catchers reported Eovaldi and deGrom dealt with issues, and both are already working back and should be okay by opening day. But like, that's already a concern there. You mentioned Perez. Like, I think he's going to be somewhere between 21 and 22, which is good. I totally agree on John Gray. Like, he sneakily wasn't bad last year. Even I think it was just a bad team that he kind of got buried, but he was fine. But I think the questions around Eovaldi, deGrom, and Heaney is enough to just keep them out. Like, this team is an injury or two away from rolling out Jake Odorizzi and Dane Dunning every 5th day. And at that point, it's a much worse rotation. Also, we talked about the deGrom injury concerns. It's one of those things that's become very overblown, but at the same time, like, here he is banged up again. So now I don't know how to feel about it. Eovaldi and deGrom, I think with the injuries kind of just puts them outside, because I just am losing a lot of confidence in them being able to stay healthy.
So I'm wearing my Not Gambling Advice shirt, right? You can find that in the episode description. But a lot of people are, DMing me, sending me messages like, what are the preseason props? Like, what are you putting out? And I just keep having to tell these people, it's like, we got to wait. I gave out 2 already, which I love. And I thought the lines were going to move, and we have seen them move on books because I thought they were broken lines. But we have to wait until spring training is over, or at least close to over, because you don't know what type of injuries can flare up. Imagine I give out a prop that I really like and some guy goes down. That's why you haven't seen me give it on MVP picks. Like, I've given out some World Series picks because I believe in this team. But in terms of player awards, player props for the season, those are coming, but they just can't come right now. Imagine if you bet on Jacob deGrom over strikeouts or something.
I was gonna ask you that, because I know you're a little bit more confident in his ability to stay healthy, but not even to, like, corner you. I think this is just like a thought exercise. Like, if there was a deGrom over strikeout prop that looked pretty appetizing, would you take it? Like, I don't think I could put a buck on Jacob deGrom anything. Yeah,
betting with my money is much different than a belief. Like, I bet on things like, I know, for example, I'm not betting on any second-year guy this year. Any of them. J-Rod, Harris, any of them. None of them. Because you don't know. The second year, we have no idea what's going to happen. We can say, look at all these numbers. Look at what they did at Stephen Kwan, for example. I can't do it. I bet on guys who have been in the league for 5 to 6 years. I know what they are at this point. I have plenty of projection systems, and I can find an edge based on that. That's why all of the projection systems, the Excel sheets, they're available on my Dub Club. Again, it's still free to subscribe until opening day if you want to see those. But that's kind of where I'm leaning. Like, I'm going, and that's what's burned me in the past. There's a belief that we should get to this. For example, young guys, like, we think they're going to be like this, but betting with my money, I need a huge sample size. Yep. And the Texas Rangers are the definition of not enough sample size to really go off of. And our last one, this is a good rotation. This is a great rotation. I think this might be 11 based on a higher floor, because the San Diego Padres have Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, and Blake Snell. That's awesome. Like, we don't even really need to talk about that. I think what we should talk about, of course, and maybe the most common conversation that we've had on this podcast over this offseason, is the back end of the Padres rotation. They signed Michael Wacha, which I like, but anyone who's looking deeper into Michael Wacha's stats see incredible regression. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen, but it's something to watch out for. Then you look at the 5 starter with Nick Martinez, Seth Lugo. They're relievers, but Nick Martinez in a 5 role, I'm much more confident in than Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo. Now, if they didn't sign Michael Wacha, I'd be a little bit more nervous, but even bringing Michael Wacha into the fold, I'm not so excited that he's going to have this great season, but the Padres have to be on our honorable mentions because the top 3 are so great. And then you move to kind of an unknown there with 4 and 5.
Wacha helps a lot because I didn't like the ideas we talked about in the past of needing both Martinez and Lugo. Now, technically speaking, you only need one of Martinez or Lugo to perform in the rotation, and then assume that Wacha can kind of hold one of the spots there. Or another way of thinking about it is 2 of Wacha, Martinez, and Lugo have to prove that they can hold down a rotation spot. That makes me feel a lot better than both of those guys needing to perform, because we both, and all of us have talked about on the podcast, the questions around those 2 guys that have not really started much in Martinez and Lugo hardly ever. I also feel better about Martinez than Lugo. And I think if Martinez is your 4 and Wacha is your 5, I think you feel a lot better about that. And if Wacha does hit this wall of regression, then you plug Lugo in there. Feel a lot better about that. So then the 3-headed monster at the top, too, of Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove, who did break his pinky toe or something like that in the weight room, but he should be fine. I mean, that 3-headed monster is money, right? Like, you're going to feel really good about getting a quality start from those 3 guys 60% of the time, right? So I think that those 3 guys alone put this rotation right on the brink of top 10. I agree.
But at number 10, this is a rotation that we had to move down, and it's because Tyler Glasnow hit another snag. And at number 10, we have the Tampa Bay Rays, headlined by Shane McClanahan, Drew Rasmussen, who developed this breaking ball and is just so damn good now. Zach Eflin is big in the fantasy baseball circles. I know our guy Colby and our guy Clay have been talking about him on the Just Fantasy Baseball show. That's been awesome. Definitely a podcast that you guys should check out as fantasy baseball season approaches. But Jeffrey Springs was awesome too. Disgusting. And then they have Tyler Glasnow and like whatever you're kind of going to get from him. And we know that the Rays just have pitchers up and down the pipeline who they can bring up basically kind of at any time. But with Glasnow now, again, hitting a snag, it's constant with him. And it infuriates me because I swear on everything I love, when Tyler Glasnow pitches, it looks like one of the best pitchers I've ever seen. He's 6'8" with that extension, throwing 98-mile-an-hour fastballs with high spin. In the box, it must look like 104. Yeah. And then he breaks off this beautiful curveball, mixing in an incredible slider that he developed last year. It looks as good as anyone. We saw in the playoffs. Like, when he pitches, he is as good as anyone. But he doesn't pitch. He doesn't. He threw 6 innings last year in the regular season. But then they have Shane, they have Drew, they have, plenty of guys. So they will be a good rotation, but Tyler Glasnow. But Taj Bradley is coming up.
Yep.
And that's a guy who I really want to talk to you about, because I remember when we were there at the Futures game, I sent you a text because I was sitting up behind home plate watching Taj Bradley pitch. And the Taj Bradley fastball is coming in at 95. And I'm like, this is faster than 95. Like, I swear, this is 100. This high spin heater is incredible that he's got the breaking ball too. I know he's kind of getting further along in his progression. Do you see him making an impact this year?
Yeah, I really do. Because that riding fastball you saw, like it's continued to tick up. The slider's nasty. And now he's been working on a split. And the split is starting to get more comfortable for him. If he's got that split playing too, I mean, he's going to be gross. It's going to be a problem. So I think we're going to see him early enough to factor him in here in terms of like our assessment of the Rays organization our assessment of the Rays rotation. So I think we see him early enough to be a contributor for this rotation. I do hope McClanahan can stay healthy. I think that's another interesting wrinkle in this, getting that shot at the end of last year. He has looked pretty good this spring so far. Jeffrey Springs, the fact that the Rays were already willing to extend him, I think shows you how they feel about him. So if Taj Bradley is that other alternate that can fit in here, I think that definitely keeps this rotation in that conversation. But yeah, a healthy Glasnow, this is a top what rotation if Glasnow is healthy?
I mean, imagine Shane Baz being healthy.
Huh. Yeah, if you've got Baz and Glasnow, it's probably a top 5 rotation.
I might venture to say it's the best in baseball. Like, you have a healthy Glasnow, Shane McClanahan, Shane Baz, Taj Bradley, Drew Rasmussen, and then you have like Jeffrey Springs as the 6.
Yeah,
that's the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah, that's the deepest and most ridiculous rotation. So, I mean, they could get there. They could, but man, I'm Glasnow is another one where it's just like you're hoping that this is the year, and then he doesn't even give you time for any suspense. He gets hurt, right away. Yeah. And it was an oblique for Glasnow. Is that what it was?
Almost positive, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully. I have it right here. It was an oblique. So might take a little while. Thank goodness it's not like an arm issue, but again, we might not see him for a little bit.
Yeah, and obliques certainly aren't good. Like, you use your oblique a lot in baseball, whether it's hitting or pitching. We see guys go down with oblique injuries a lot, and they hurt.
They don't come back anytime soon.
And number 9, team with a lot of upside, but what are we going to get? Los Angeles Dodgers come in at number 9. Julio Urias, obviously, we know what we're going to get. We're going to get top-of-the-line starting pitching, one of the best left-handers in Major League Baseball. We think we know what we're going to get from Kershaw, 130 innings at a 2.28 ERA last year. Fantastic, but again, his back. Like, we don't know exactly what we're going to get from Clayton Kershaw this year. I'm assuming greatness, because that's what you should do when you're going into a season and Clayton Kershaw's on your team, but you never know. Tony Gonsolin, I don't mean to be rude, but sometimes, I thought there's the new host of The Daily Show. He said something funny. It was like, there is LinkedIn you, and then there is iMessage you. The LinkedIn you is what you want people to see. What you text in the deep depths of the night is who you really are. And I'll admit, I've called Tony Gonsolin Tony Fraudslin. I don't believe in him.
You don't believe in him?
I don't know if I believe in him. I believe in some of the stuff, but I don't know if I believe he was that good as if what he did last year. Maybe he proves me completely wrong and I change my tune, but as of right now, I'm still in the Tony Fraudslin trade. But that's me. Then you look at Dustin May. What is he going to give us this year? He's kind of similar to a Glasnow, where you watch him pitch and you wonder, how can anyone ever get a hit off 97 with this incredible sink to it, with a breaking ball and incredible extension? And then you have Noah Syndergaard, who is our new writer over here at justbaseball.com, one of his favorite bets for the season is his under on ERA. What is he going to give us? Like, there's so many question marks beyond Julio Urias, but at the same time, there's so many great names in this. It's a really tough rotation to know what will happen.
100%. And this is another org, though, that a couple guys that are really knocking on the door that could plug in at some point pretty early. That does help me feel a little bit better, because I do think Syndergaard can be a serviceable 4 or 5 for them. I don't think it's going to be a Dodgers magic act here. But I do think, like, we saw Fangraphs projections for Syndergaard. It's around a 4.26 ERA. 157 innings. If he gives them that, I think they're over the moon. I think that's fantastic to just give them consistency in the back end of the rotation. We know what Urias is. I agree. Like Kershaw, I think you got to hope for 120 again and go with that. I think Dustin May is the X factor here, right? Because Dustin May, as you mentioned, has the stuff to be a frontline guy, but also we've never really seen him throw more than 60 innings in a season. So, what version are we going to get from Dustin May? Are we going to get the guy that he was starting to flash being before he went down with the Tommy John surgery? I think that's the big question. But I also think there's a good chance we see one of Bobby Miller or Gavin Stone at some point this season. I think Tony Gonsolin has great stuff. I don't doubt the quality of the slider. I think, he's got good stuff, but also a guy that gets hurt all the time, sprained his ankle a couple days ago already again. X-rays were negative on that, but like Gonsolin's a guy that has been hurt every single year. So, we're talking about a lot of injuries in this rotation, but they do hedge that with several big league ready guys. And then I know a Syndergaard in there as well. So volatility though, this rotation could be fantastic as well. I think they're in a similar boat as the Rays and even the Marlins, as we talked about.
Yeah, imagine having Walker Buehler in this rotation. Then we're having a completely
how
different
about that?
conversation. I'm curious too. They lost Tyler Anderson. Do you think that was a mistake?
I kind of do, man. I do. I was surprised to see them let him go. Maybe that there's something that they saw in the numbers there, or something that they thought that maybe would restrict him from replicating what he did. But don't you feel like that's kind of exactly what they could use here? Like, I don't have confidence in a Ryan Pepiot or really plugging in the rookies. Like, I think they could be helpful, but I think what you're getting with Tyler Anderson. I was surprised that they didn't keep him.
I was also surprised that they didn't maybe offer Heaney that 2-year deal.
One of them.
Because I thought it was so interesting. I remember we talked about it on the Just Baseball show. It was the day after Andrew Heaney signed. And I said, I think it was you and Jack were both on it. And I said, that's going to work. And the reason I said that was going to work was because they signed him almost immediately. Free agency opens. Andrew Heaney were on the phone with him. They found something in his slider. Then the only problem was because he got hurt, because he was awesome with the Dodgers. Fantastic. I'm curious that they wouldn't parlay that. It's like, you were right. But is that all you wanted him for? Just 92 innings and then he's gone? Yeah. Why wouldn't you give him the 2 deal? That's why I was confused.
One of the 2 guys I would have thought they would have retained. And I guess that says that they have confidence in some of these younger guys. It's going to be a really interesting season, because I think it's just continues to be echoed by us here. And again, it's still a top 10 rotation, but this is I think the most question marks we've seen around the LA Dodgers since the inception of the Just Baseball show, right? Like, and I know we're not talking about like 20 years here, but even over the last handful of seasons, even over the last couple of years, this is the most, I think, uneasy we've been about the behemoth that is the LA Dodgers.
A team that I know you really like going into this season, and they check in at number 8 on our top 10 rotations list. That's the Toronto Blue Jays, headlined by Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman, 2 of the best pitchers in baseball last year. They get Chris Bassett from the Mets. Jose Barrios was about as bad as humanly possible last year, as was Yusei Kikuchi. And then they have Hyunjin Ryu as well at the back of the rotation, but he is, of course, banged up. This is a fascinating one, and we can talk about Bassett, Barrios, and Kikuchi in a minute, but I really want to start with Manoah, because Gausman at this point, I feel like we know what he is. With the Giants, he was awesome, and then he goes to the Blue Jays. He's awesome. He's not the 2.5 ERA guy, but a 3.3 with that many strikeouts and walks. He was one of the league leaders in WAR. Like, that guy plays. We know him. Yep. Manoah is fascinating. And I don't know if you've looked into the deeper numbers with Manoah.
I have, yeah.
What is with that? I know he doesn't strike out a lot of guys. I know he has some walks, but the man induces soft contact. Like, for a guy who has the big xERA, the big FIP, xFIP, 92nd percentile in a hard hit rate against. Yeah, he doesn't have strikeout stuff, but that's not really his game. I fell in love with him at the All-Star game and then watched him in the second half. I thought he was dynamite.
Yeah.
But my analytical brain, my gambling brain, looking for regression, looking for value, thinks to myself, is he the guy to fade next year? The guy who had a 2.24 ERA, everyone's going to be on him. The Blue Jays, of course, are going to be crazy, crazy overvalued when he pitches. But will they truly be overvalued? That is the one pitcher that I cannot seem to grasp, because my baseball brain, I said this yesterday, believes in Alek Manoah. I think he's going to be totally fine. My analytical brain says this guy might be a 3.5-ish. He's projected by Fangraphs to have like a 4.1 next year.
Yeah, I think I don't know what they use in Roster Resource, but in Roster Resource, he's projected to have a 3.75. I was just going to mention that. Like, that's really high. If you told Alek Manoah he was going to have a 3.75 this year, he'd be livid. He'd tell you to shove it. And I think he's made that clear. Like, he will advocate for himself. I do like the way he is not afraid.
I love the way he carries himself.
He's a dog. He's from Miami. He's got that that dog mentality. You can see it on the mound. We saw it in the All-Star.
He makes me, when I watch him, have the bottom upper lip that you see in Wolf of Wall Street when Leonardo DiCaprio is yelling at everyone like
Yeah, he's just
like,
like,
yeah.
like come at me, yeah, like
Yeah.
try and fuck with me, and that's why I think he's gonna outperform the metrics, right? Like
Right?
that, literally, right there is why I think he outperforms the metrics. But I do think he's due for a little bit of regression. Like he definitely was. I think overperforming to a degree. A 2.24 is pretty absurd. But I
Absurd.
also think that the xFIP is a little bit too harsh. I think he's somewhere between what the xERA and the actual ERA was last year. He was a 3.31 xERA, 2.24 ERA. If he's a 2.9 to even 3 guy, which is more favoring the xERA, that's still a phenomenal, 1/2 starter. And I think that's what he's going to be. I really do. Because you mentioned the weak contact. He's always going to get that. That outfield is spectacular defensively. We know they've got one of the best third basemen in baseball in Matt Chapman. Bo Bichette could be better at shortstop, but overall, I think that they've got the defense. They've got, I think he's proven to be able to outperform it, and it's been all the way since the minors. So I like Manoah. I believe in him, though I do think he takes a little bit of a step back. I think Gausman is Gausman. It really comes down to, and I think Bassett's Bassett, honestly. I don't have much question about Bassett giving you a high 3s ERA. What do you get from Kikuchi and Barrios? And honestly, I can't believe this is a question, but who do you think is better in 2023? Barrios or Kikuchi? It's a crazy thing that's a question, but it's a good question.
It is a good question. And I would go Barrios because it's Jose Barrios. But at the same time, he has major issues. Major. Yeah. And you say Kikuchi's look great in spring. I don't know if you watch it. Look great in spring. He's got a beard now. Looks great. My issue, because I think both of them will be better than last year, which is important. Like if they're better than they were last year, this rotation is better. Yeah. I think the X factor is Bassett because, dude, I have this deep, dark feeling in the pit of my stomach that contract is going to age terribly. I don't know. There's something about it. It's like,
look, I'll never question a gut feeling, man.
Yeah,
I'll always respect a gut feeling.
It's a gut feeling. Like it's not really based on a ton.
I don't need you to back it up.
Yeah, there's some. I'll just back it up slightly. There's some metrics that would point to it, but it's just like, I don't know if that's going to work. I think this guy's a little bit older. I didn't like him at the tail end of the season for the Mets. He was a guy who I
don't like him in the playoffs. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just he's the 3.
Yeah,
there's just,
and he shouldn't be. That's the fucking thing.
It should be.
Jose Barrios should be one of the best 3s in baseball. That's what he's being paid to fucking do. It is crazy to me. But
losing Ross Stripling sucks. He was great for them last year.
That's the thing, and that is a subtraction. I think the 1-2 it keeps them up there, and Bassett hedges some of the issues in the back end. But Barrios and Kikuchi are better names at 4-5. And could be good 4-5s, but I got just as much concern about them at the 4 and 5 as some of the other 4 and 5s we've mentioned already in this podcast.
So I think also we should say we just spent a lot of time not bashing the Blue Jays, but just highlighting the concerns. On the other side, if you want a glass half full approach to this Blue Jays rotation, could be the best in baseball. Imagine Barrios bounces back to what he was. You say Kikuchi bounces back to what he was. Chris Bassett is as good as he was with the Mets over the entire season, and Manoah and Gausman keep doing their thing. This could be an incredibly elite rotation, but it's just such a tough one to gauge. That's why it's at 8, I feel like that's a good ranking for them.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot for them.
At number 7, we have the Philadelphia Phillies, who have less question marks than the Blue Jays. Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler at the top, enough said. These two are as good as any pitchers in Major League Baseball. Ranger Suarez, man, this guy just impresses me. He, on the biggest stage against the Astros, looked like one of the Phillies pitchers that you can depend on. In the regular season, he's just been great. He's got a good pitch mix. He's just a solid-ass pitcher, and it's time we give Ranger Suarez his flowers.
He reminds me of Nestor. He reminds me he's got a lot of similarities with Nestor. They just overperform and get outs on a low 90s fastball that you don't know how it gets so many swings and misses, but it does.
I almost think he's like a poor man's Framber in that way as well. Just kind of from that mold, just they go after you with a couple of pitches and it works, and they just have good command, and he's just a good pitcher. But on the other side, I'm not a Taijuan Walker guy. But as a 4-5, what am I saying here? He's going to be 5. He's going to be a 4 ERA guy with a ton of innings.
I was gonna say, like, do I like the contract he got? No, not my money though, and we're not weighing most, best bargained rotations, right? We're just ranking these rotations, and if Walker's your 4, you're in great shape.
And then they have Andrew Painter. We could talk about Bailey Falter for a minute, but
Yeah,
Andrew Painter, I got to say, is much more entertaining. Like a million times
yeah,
more entertaining. Andrew Painter could be that dude. He could be the guy who starts opening day and looks like Aaron Nola or Zach Wheeler. Maybe it takes him a few years. Maybe it's not this season. But man, the potential is just glowing off this kid. Glowing. 99. He's throwing 95-mile-an-hour cutters, and he
yeah.
looks as good as anybody, any young pitcher in baseball.
The cutter was a big addition, and I hope so much that he's healthy. We're still kind of waiting to hear more on what's up with that elbow,
Yeah.
and to see what the deal is there. I assume it's more precautionary, but man, if he is healthy, that is an X factor here. I don't like to just count on rookies right away, but you can count like him, Yuri, Grayson,
Stuff plays
those guys. You can count on those guys to be solid pitchers immediately. Are they going to hit their ceilings? I don't know, but I can bet you that they will be good 4s and 5s from the get-go and give you flashes of way more than that. So if Painter is healthy and in the fold here, I think we might be a little delayed now. So the unfortunate part is, does that mean we're subjected to Bailey Falter a couple times around? Like, I guess, but that he's not the worst. Like, if that's your 5, that's okay.
Yeah.
But the second Painter plugs in there, this rotation is 1 through 5, a bunch of dudes. Falter was like fine last year in the regular season for what it's worth.
One question for you, assuming health. Let's say we get good news from the elbow thing for Painter. More likely he has a season like Spencer Strider last year, or more likely he flames out and is clearly not ready. I think it's so much closer to what Strider can do.
Yeah, assuming he's 100% healthy, and I'm sure it's going to take a little time for him to get back. But yeah, with that stuff, with the fastball in the upper 90s, with what he already is able to do command wise, I'd be willing to bet, and obviously that's a crazy ceiling, but also a crazy floor of flaming out. I'd be willing to bet that he'd be closer to that ceiling based on just what I've seen from him already.
And this next team at number 6, I fought for them to be in the top 5 because I love this rotation. And at number 6 is the Milwaukee Brewers. Corbin Burnes, for my money, might be the best pitcher in Major League Baseball. You could have an argument between him and Sandy and DeGrom. I would pick Sandy and DeGrom, but like you could make a very good argument for Corbin Burnes, who is number 1 in WAR over the past 2 seasons of all pitchers in Major League Baseball at 12. Then you have Woodruff, who threw 150-ish innings last year, dealt with an injury a little bit, but I think when this guy pitches, he's still like a top 20, 25 player. He's ranked 26 in our rankings, but I think he should have been higher. I'm a huge Brandon Woodruff guy, huge strikeout guy.
Fantastic second half.
Fantastic second half. Dominant stuff. Freddie Peralta, a guy, again, who we were Team Freddie. This was the Freddie podcast when we first started, and he came out 2.8 ERA and 144 innings, looked incredible. Then dealt with an injury, only threw about 70-ish innings, but still looked like when he got finally settled, looked like the Freddie Peralta. Barring injury, one of the best 3s in baseball in my eyes, because I think he'd be a 2 in most rotations and a 1 in some. Then you have slight question marks, but it's not like the Phillies. Like, I think Eric Lauer is fine. I think, like, how much better is Taijuan Walker going to be than Eric Lauer next year? Like, I think Eric Lauer might end up with a better ERA than him. Then you look at a guy like Wade Miley, who is the definition of a solid 5, better than Bailey Falter in my eyes, who just 4.2 ERA, ton of innings, not going to strike anybody out. It's going to be a boring game because Wade Miley is starting, but they're going to get wins out of him. And then, of course, you have Aaron Ashby as kind of the X factor who could come in, maybe play a relief role, but maybe start. Really, really good stuff. Young lefty. This rotation, I think, is so damn solid, and the Cardinals should watch their backs because if all of these guys are healthy all year, they have a dangerous 5.
Yeah, and they got some guys knocking on the door too, and so they just have depth, which I like too. You got Ethan Small, who you could plug in there if you're banged up. You got Robert Gasser, who's a borderline top 100 prospect, lefty that came over in that Josh Hader deal. He's a very talented arm who has shown some really good flashes and should be big league ready at some point this year. But to go back to your point of Burnes and Woodruff, I mean, it doesn't get much more exciting than that. a healthy Peralta, we know that that's a bona fide 3 at least. Health is big there, but he looked good when he came back. He's still just 26. And yeah, I mean, Lauer, similar to Walker, like if Lauer's your 4, you're not upset about that. He showed flashes of being a really solid pitcher. I think he's a high 3s guy, and I think that's fine. And then Miley as that alternate at your 5 spot with either, like you said, if Ashby's okay with the shoulder fatigue, if some of the other guys that I just mentioned could plug in and be options. I like this rotation a lot. I feel I like this team. Like we'll talk about it in the previews. I always am a sucker for the Brewers. And I think I'm going to be suckered in this year again. But I will say, I think this rotation, that was one when you brought it up, I was like, man, I got no strong opinion one way or another, but I hear you on all of that. And I'm with you. Like I could see this rotation being top 5 without a problem.
I think they're going to be dangerous. I'm definitely going to have some hot takes about the Brewers when it comes to
Let's go.
the NL Central. But getting into the top 5, the Yankees. And the Yankees are interesting. My Yankees. You got Garrett Cole at the top. You got Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez Jr., Luis Severino, Frankie Montas if he comes back healthy, and then you got Domingo Germán, you got Clark Schmidt, you got a couple of arms there. Carlos Rodon, 7 to 10 days. He will not pitch due to a strained forearm.
Yeah.
Comments from Brian Cashman says, we hope we see him in April. That worries the shit out of me.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like
shit out of me. If we remember, Walker Buehler came out strained forearm. What happened after? Tommy John. Yeah. I'm not saying that's going to happen. We don't know the full details yet. It could just be something little and he's back. And then this is great. And the Yankees could be the second best rotation in baseball.
Correct.
But with Montes going down, my hatred for Domingo Germán, Nestor, like we love Nestor and we think that Nestor will continue to be great. But of course we don't know. We have no idea. We really have no idea. The only constant we know is Garrett Cole, who had a 3.5 ERA last year. There's a ton of questions, but again, the upside of this rotation is best in baseball. Best in baseball. That's why 5 feels like a good spot for him.
I mean, dude, a healthy Sevy is, I think, a top 30 arm, and I think a lot of big league hitters would agree with that. I mean, he's routinely brought up as one of the nastier guys that you're going to face in the big leagues if you're a big league hitter. We saw what he did last year. He was spectacular when he was on the field. I believe in Nestor. I think we all do. But how much do you get? Is it 130 innings, 140 innings, 150 innings? We'll have to see and see how his body holds up because he's coming off of his first real full season. Cole, I think will even be better than last year. I think that there was some bad luck in there, and we saw how good he was on the playoff stage. But I do believe in the depth here too, which does make me feel a little bit better. Like I think Clark Schmidt, we talked about in the past. Like I think Clark Schmidt's a fine plug-in guy as a 5 and spot starter. I think some of the other guys that they have in the mix, like Randy Vasquez and some others that they get, Johnny Brito, Yoendrys Gomez, even they could throw in there. Like the Yankees can piece it together and have some success. But I agree, like the top end outcome here is best rotation in baseball because Rodon was a top 10 arm last year. Cole is pretty much, regarded as a top 10 arm, whether he's given up the homers or not. Severino, we just talked about how good he can be. And then Nestor Cortez was a top 30 arm, top 35 arm in baseball last year by the numbers. So, I mean, this could easily be the best rotation in baseball. But like so many others, we're talking about health here. The good news for the Yankees is they hedge that with some depth and a great bullpen.
So you just came out with your top 10 prospects for the Yankees system. Yes. And you and I have been texting, and I sent you a couple of names. And you mentioned Brito, you mentioned Randy Vasquez, you mentioned Gomez. But one name that I really wanted you to check out, because a guy who I was excited about, and I saw in other publications they were excited about him too, is Will Warren.
Yeah.
Who could maybe serve as the Yankees' next Hayden Wesneski, who we saw traded over to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for Scott Effross. And Scott Effross, unfortunately, now Tommy John. So the Yankees look like they lost that trade because of how good Wesneski could be for the Chicago Cubs. But they might have another one in the pipeline, and that is Will Warren. When you were making your top 10 prospects list, what did you see with Will Warren, and what should Yankee fans expect from him this year?
Yeah, that was exactly what I saw. It was like when I saw that, I was like, now I get why they traded Hayden Wesneski. They got another one right here, who's younger and might have, a little bit more of a bag in terms of his stuff. Although Wesneski has continued to tweak it, and now looks like he's got a pretty deep bag of stuff. I think Warren is going to be a top 100 prospect by midseason update, and I think Warren could be a guy that we see up there if they really need an arm, because he's kind of the guy that they need in that rotation in regards to not being a fly ball pitcher. There's a lot of fly ball pitchers in this rotation for Yankee Stadium. Will Warren is nasty slider. It's that Yankee sweeper, and it's that heavy fastball. He gets a lot of ground balls. He gets a lot of weak contact, and I think he'd be the perfect back end of the rotation innings eater for the Yankees. I think that's what they're planning on, and there's a chance he could plug in this year and be a guy for them. Of all the names we mentioned before, I mentioned them ahead of Warren because they're closer to big league ready, but I think Warren will be better and more reliable than all of them. Like, those guys are plugins. When Warren's ready, I want that guy sticking in the rotation every fifth day, because I really do think he's that safe of an arm.
At number 4, the Houston Astros have almost as much upside as the Yankees, but I think even at this point, they might have a safer floor. And that's Framber Valdez at the top, Christian Javier following him. Then you have a guy like Luis Garcia, who's kind of the definition of solid at this point. Jose Urquidy has gotten blasted in spring training, but I don't know how much stock I put into that. Jack had a funny note about Tom Hamilton, his comments about Jose Urquidy. And Hunter Brown, like, what are we going to get? Because mostly been a bullpen guy, but we know, at least I know now, never doubt the Astros development when it comes to starting pitchers. Just don't care if you don't like them. Just don't doubt them. You could say, oh, I'm not as high as others, but I've learned
don't count him out.
Javier, don't count him out. And then Lance McCullers should come back when? Middle of the season? So this team, they hedge upside. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but basically they have a good combination of upside and floor with Valdez, Javier, and Garcia. And then they have Hunter Brown, who could be the rookie of the year or could not make the full season. Where do you lean on Hunter Brown? Because I feel like that's the most important part of this rotation.
Yeah, it's funny. I think people have gotten really excited about Hunter Brown because of the Astros effect, because his mechanics look like Justin Verlander. I like Hunter Brown a lot. I wrote a piece kind of breaking down his arsenal and why I think he can be a dude for them. And it also helps when you throw 20 innings of like 1-run ball or 2-run ball in the big leagues, to start your career. That was also in a like long relief kind of role. He made a couple starts. They didn't really stretch him out that much.
Swingman type.
Yeah, he was really in that swingman role.
Javier.
And I think he can be fantastic in that swingman role. But I don't know how his command's going to hold up every fifth day. And I think if anybody tells you that they're positive that it will, I think they're just buying into the system a little too much there. He's always had command issues. That's why he wasn't really a top 100 consensus top 100 prospect going into the year. I think he could be a really solid back end of the rotation arm. But, I don't know if the command is going to be there to be that like number 3 type right away, but it's possible. I just think that some people might be getting a little ahead of themselves here, because if he does have some command fits, I do think that he could struggle a little bit and have a rookie season as a starter. But I do kind of believe in the Fangraphs projections there, mid to high 3s ERA. I think that's probably what Brown can give you. But that's also pretty solid for a number 4 starter. I'm interested. Yeah. Is he the 5? I almost consider Urquidy the 5.
Yeah, which is fine, which is very reasonable. And then they're going to get back Lance McCullers Jr., who, when healthy, is great.
But even like we bash Urquidy, and like, trust me, like I don't think he's good, but like he's thrown 342 innings in his career. He's made 60 starts. He's got a 3.74 ERA. Like, can we just pencil that guy into just being a fine 5? Like,
yeah, I think we can.
Right. Like, so if he's a fine 5, I think the big question is Luis Garcia a bona fide 3? And is Hunter Brown going to be a bona fide 4? I think those are the 2 questions. And I can't answer the rookie question other than, what I think he's going to be, which I think is a solid 4. I'm interested if Luis Garcia is going to be closer to a 4 or a 3. That is my question here. But I do feel fine about this rotation. Like, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. Number 3, this is a rotation that I am so excited for. Oh my gosh, I love this rotation. Number 3, Seattle Mariners. Luis Castillo is the headliner at the top. Dog. Logan Gilbert at the number 2 spot. Dog. and he's been working on a splitter, which looks nasty. I've seen that in some of his preseason videos. He looks great. George Kirby, I'm as excited about him as any young pitcher in Major League Baseball. When you have command like that of just so many different pitches, there's some concerns there because a lot of them are kind of not similar. It's just 70% of his pitches are cutters and sinkers and four seams, but he's still just so freaking good. I loved watching him in the playoffs, especially against those Astros where he threw 7 shutout innings. Robbie Ray, like, we make fun of him, but when Robbie Ray's your 4, that's awesome. I mean, that's incredible. He'd be a 3 in most rotations in baseball. And if he improves from last year, which was a down year for him, like, he's awesome. He's a great 4. And then you have like a combination of Marco Gonzalez and Chris Flexen, who are the definition of guys who just get outs. They're not sexy. Their stuff isn't great. They're not going to put up great numbers, but they just get outs and they fill innings for a team with an unbelievable bullpen who only needs 4 to 5 out of them on any given day, maybe just 3. This rotation is unbelievably great.
Yeah, I think the bad postseason, the coming out of the bullpen and just giving up the bomb for Robbie Ray kind of left a bad taste in our mouths.
And he's not a reliever. Like,
yeah, I mean, this guy, look, he was 3.7 ERA. I think he'll improve from that. Even a lot of the underlying numbers point towards that, but he struck out more than 10 per 9, right? Like, his command was fine, and that was the big issue, right? Was he used to walk guys in droves. He was still walking less than 3 per 9. I think he's going to be fine. I actually think he's going to improve this year a little bit. But again, if that's your 4, you're in great shape because I feel very confident about the top 3. I think Luis Castillo has proven he's an ace. I think Logan Gilbert and George Kirby are phenomenal 2 and 3 right there. And I would be concerned about the 5 slot if they didn't have 2 mediocre guys. Like, if you're going to have a mediocre 5 slot, have 2 mediocre guys and ride the hot hand. We've seen Flexen comfortable coming out of the pen. He might do that. But if Marco Gonzalez struggles, then bam, he plugs right back into the rotation. But Marco Gonzalez is a guy that has overperformed the metrics as long as he has been in the big leagues, right? Like, he will forever overperform the metrics. You look at his career numbers of 4.08 ERA, a 4.65 xFIP. He's always been a guy that overperforms it. And last year was his second highest innings total of his career. And he posted a 4.13 ERA. He didn't strike anybody out, but if that's your 5, like, that's fine. And if he doesn't pan out, Chris Flexen is a fine 5 as well.
Let's say both of them suck. Emerson Hancock and Bryce Miller are right there.
Bryce Miller. Yeah, I mean, and Hancock's apparently looked good. Bryce Miller is a guy that I think that will plug in and be good right away. He'll probably be the only 80 grade fastball we got on the top 100. But how about like Matt Brash? We know that he was way more successful in the bullpen, but again, emergency. You plug that guy in the rotation, things could click for him there. They've got so many options. I think this rotation could easily, be up there with any of them, and that's why I love that we have him as high as 3.
But at number 2, the Braves are pretty damn electric. How about Max Fried? One of the best pitchers overall in baseball. Good. One of the best lefties in baseball. Spencer Strider, maybe the best 130 innings last year.
Yeah.
Out of anybody.
Yeah.
Kyle Wright, we joke that he won 20 games and how funny that is and how wins don't matter. But overall, Kyle Wright was great. Like, yeah. If you win 20 games, you're doing something right. But we can talk about all the numbers all day. But Kyle Wright is a great 3. One of the best 3s in baseball. Charlie Morton, like, he's going to chuck.
He's still
no good. Pun intended. Like, he's still that guy. Like, he's still going to give you innings where you win ball games. And he's at the bottom of the rotation. And then you have bounce back candidates in Ian Anderson. Remember Mike Soroka? Does anyone remember him? Because he was elite as a rookie and has just been dealing with injury after Achilles, after everything, year over year over year. But if he comes back and then they got Jared Schuster waiting in the wings.
Yeah, I love Schuster.
Like, dude, this rotation is so good. They are the definition of tons of upside with a great floor. Love this rotation.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, what else do you want out of a rotation? You have upside and you have a floor. That's pretty much checks every box for you, right? And Schuster has been fantastic this spring. And then they've also got Bryce Elder, who is another really good, just alternative option. I'm worried about Ian Anderson, but that said, like, if Soroka, like you mentioned, is healthy, That makes their rotation. That's a big if, but that makes their rotation. They have an outside shot at having the best rotation in baseball with a healthy Soroka. They could probably still be the best rotation in baseball without him. With him, it's a joke. But on top of that, having an Elder, having a Schuster knocking on the door, having the other guys that they have involved there, and Ian Anderson, which is so tough because this guy was 2 outings in the same series against the Dodgers, carving them. Like, if that guy can rediscover any of that, then this rotation is insane. And Morton, people can point towards the age. He got better as the year went on, and he had a better second half. So I still think Morton's got plenty left in the tank. He was coming off of a broken freaking leg, for goodness sake. Like, I think he had to get his legs under him, literally. This rotation is insane. I feel safe about it, and I also think it could be even better than we think, and that a lot of people think going into this year.
But at number one, I think the rotation that has no questions. Because I think every rotation that we've talked about, there's something that it's like, oh, maybe, but oh, maybe not. Yeah. With the New York Mets at number one, what's the question? Verlander and Scherzer, enough said. Kodai Senga, I guess, is a question but the question is, will he be elite or pretty good? Like, I think that's where we're at with him. It's not, oh, will he be terrible? It's, will he be incredible or solid? And then you have Cookie Carrasco, who I think is kind of one of these underrated pitchers this year. You forget about Carlos Carrasco. I think he's as solid of a 4 as they come. And then like Quintana, I mean, he was amazing last year. But then again, he goes up and down. But like that plays, like as a 5, that plays. And then David Peterson is a guy that I know a lot of Mets fans are really excited about. And they think that he should get starts every 5th day. And I know Ryan Finkelstein, our managing editor, is all aboard the David Peterson propaganda engine. And I started to jump on board them last year because he has damn good stuff. He really does. And the fact that that's your 6, like if you have a problem, there is no problem though. So it's like, will he? He only will if an injury happens. And of course we can't project injuries, but even if someone does, slotting in David Peterson, like, is David Peterson better than Eric Lauer? Like,
he's right there.
Yeah, he's right there. Like, it's an incredibly deep rotation filled with Cy Young Award winners, upside, high floors. It's as good as it gets.
I mean, you got 2 Hall of Famers, like you mentioned. Quintana, and it was almost like a perfect thought exercise here because Quintana hits the IL with a stress fracture in his rib. I assume he'll be back relatively early in the season, maybe for opening day. But that kind of forced me to think, okay, you're plugging David Peterson in there. I don't feel any different about the rotation. Like, I know Quintana was spectacular last year, and if he replicates what he did last year, it'll be better than whatever you get from David Peterson. But I was kind of expecting a mid-30s ERA from Quintana, and I feel like it's exactly what you can expect from Peterson, but with more Ks. Like, he was really solid last year. The stuff ticked up a full mile per hour. The breaking ball was better. He had a little bit more of a unique arsenal. It's kind of tweaked it a little bit. He struggled, going in and out of the bullpen at points, but if he's consistently starting, I think this is a guy that could be really solid. And I'm interested to see how they use him, especially with the injury, but having him as an alternate, and then even like a Tyler McGill as like your 7th arm, like that's just another good depth arm. That guy throws 100, like, and has shown flashes of being pretty nasty. He has the blow up starts, but he showed flashes of being pretty nasty. If that's a plug and play guy as well, this is insane to have that kind of depth on top of 2 Hall of Famers. And then they're signing Kodai Senga to be a 3 by signing him for the amount of money they signed him for. But Kodai Senga could be a 2, right? Like, Kodai Senga could be even better. He could be a 4. It's possible, but I think it's more likely that he's a 3 or a 2 than he is a 4. And I think he's going to settle into that 3 role, and he'll be one of the better 3s in baseball. If that's the case, this is a ridiculous rotation.
And we could talk about prospects, but they won't need them. I mean, we talk about Beatty, we talk about Francisco Alvarez, we talk about Mark Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio, and we don't talk about Mets pitching prospects because we don't need to. Like, where are they going to play this year? Like, who's one name, I guess, if everything goes wrong, that Mets fans should be on the watch for?
Jose Budo. And Budo's looked good this spring and looked good and really good in AAA last year. He made one spot start in the big leagues and got knocked around a little bit last year, but Budo's solid. I think Budo is another guy. If you have to go to him, that's fine. He's got a couple good secondary pitches and he throws strikes. So like they've got one guy waiting in the wings there, but their system's not that deep in the pitching department, and they don't need it to be, like you said. They've got time to figure that out.
That's the list. Our honorable mentions, the Texas Rangers, the San Diego Padres, and the Miami Marlins. At number 10, we had the Rays. Number 9, we had the Dodgers. Number 8 was the Blue Jays. Number 7 was the Philadelphia Phillies. Number 6 was the Milwaukee Brewers. Number 5 was the New York Yankees. 4, the Houston Astros. And at 3, the Mariners. Then we had the Atlanta Braves at number 2. And then the fighting New York Mets at number 1. That'll do it for this episode of the Just Baseball Show. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. Again, the best way to support our show and our company is to get yourself some Just Baseball merch. I'm wearing my hat. I'm wearing the shirt as well. You can find that in the episode description. But if you don't want to spend a dime, we completely understand. Hit us with a like, hit us with a comment if you're watching on YouTube, and hit that subscribe button. Let us know who you think are the top 10 rotations. And if we said anything blasphemous, please let us know in the comments.
Of course.
And of course, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you've been enjoying all this off-season content. We have more top 10s to get through, as well as full season previews, over-under projections for every team, MVP awards. We are leading you right up to the MLB season in 2023, as well as tons and tons and tons of World Baseball Classic content on justbaseball.com, previews for every single team, and a litany of podcasts on the Just Baseball Network. And with that, thank you, everybody.